Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we discuss my thoughts on Series 10, Episode 7 of Doctor Who, The Pyramid at the End of the World. This one was definitely an interesting watch, not least of which because it has the distinction of being the first episode of Doctor Who in a while that really had me guessing and grasping at straws for a large majority of it. Not really sure what the hell was happening. I'm piecing together, okay, there are chemicals in play, there's probably something biochemical that is going to be a problem, and you have the monks depositing themselves in the midst of these three, biggest national armies in our world, these biggest countries, where everyone is on the precipice of a potential war, and using the doomsday clock, all of the watchmen and everything like that. And it seemed like there were a lot of different things going on. I wasn't quite sure how this was all going to collide and coincide, and how this was all happening and unfolding in tandem and such like that. So it was an interesting watch because I'm kind of piecing it together. And I think this was meant for the plotting, but I'm piecing it together as, of course, the Doctor and Ardell and Bill are. There's a lot of information that they aren't privy to that we, the viewer, are. And even then, it's just kind of like trying to piece this together and figure out what one thing has to do with another was a little challenging for me, and not in any way, shape, or form, lessening the viewing experience. I was actively engaged for that. I was like, wow, this is a proper mystery. I'm not sure what's happening. Even as a creative person, a writer of my own accord, usually I can kind of get a bearing in the first few minutes of an episode where the plot is going to be going, where they're going to take the story, what they're likeliest to do. I'm not always correct, but, for the most part, I get my bearings relatively quickly with certain episodes, the majority of episodes, really. And it's really the special ones or the the more divisive ones that challenge my thinking and keep me on my toes and keep me guessing, that are an interesting experience for me because I don't, encounter them nearly as often. And this episode was that for me. I was really trying to figure it out, what one thing, again, had to do with the other. Following the scientist into her workplace, she and her partner, she has her glasses broken, so she can't read the meters and everything, the monitors. And, of course, he's just coming off of a night of partying and having gotten drunk. His eyes are failing him. And so there's a miscalculation and all this stuff. And they peter it out little by little. So you're not really sure up front what is going on. About the time you, the viewer, are figuring it out and understanding, oh, okay, this is what the monks are talking about. It's not nuclear annihilation. The Doctor and such weren't just going through the motions trying to piece that together. That was a legitimate potential threat, and especially where this pyramid deposited itself. So of course they have to explore every avenue they can, and by the time, again, they sort of get to that culmination point, that realization point, you, the viewer, have also gotten to that point. And so it's like, oh crap, now there is a thorough, legitimate countdown. How are we going to save the day? How are we going to get out of this? And it was walking on eggshells toward the end of the episode, because the Doctor's blindness thoroughly impacts him and potentially hinders him from getting out of this alive. And it was tense. And I had the creepy crawlies up my spine because I'm like, oh wow, I didn't expect this at all. So it was highly enjoyable. And as I have tended to do with these episode discussion videos, I've gone and made a proper list of all the things this particular episode reminded me of, which I will be touching upon basically now. You don't have to wait any longer. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't immediately bring up Pyramids of Mars. Of course, there's a pyramid involved. That's going to be the knee-jerk reaction to anyone's, first impressions of this episode without actually seeing it. And even with the monks and everything like that, I mean, I will admit there's a part of me that's just waiting to find out this is the cult of Sutek or something like that, or the cult of Omega. I've heard people, discussing in the rumorville that maybe Omega's coming back. Somebody saw an Omega symbol in a previous episode and such like that. This thing has cropped up before, and I'm starting to wonder if it's actually something more related to the writer of this episode, the co-writer in any case, because Stephen Moffat, of course, picks up one half of that, and then you have Peter Harness, who co-wrote this episode. And it's interesting, I didn't actually realize when I put my list together of former episodes this reminded me of, that Harness actually worked on a couple of those former episodes. So take that for what you will. But again, with the character of Erica in this episode, I jotted down in my notes the scientist, the chief scientist we follow into her workplace, who, you know, is trying to combat this biochemical release that could wipe out the entire world within a year's time, all life on Earth. I thought immediately, you know, as she's getting involved and trying to quell this, trying to not let it escape, and once the doctor is involved and everything, he seems very much impressed with her. And I was thinking, perfect candidate for my series, Great Companions That Never Were. Who knows? Maybe she'll become a companion. You never know. But I just thought she was a great, you know, personality. I love that she's fast in action, still doing everything in her power, even at that 11th hour alongside the doctor, to put the cap back on the bottle. And I just thought that was highly, highly impressive and would make her an outstanding candidate for a companion in, you know, the TARDIS future adventures in time and space with the doctor. And so again, Pyramids of Mars was one that did, of course, occur to me. It's going to be the thing that occurs to everybody. And as I say, I was waiting almost for Sutek to come out of the woodwork somewhere. When they go into that room with all the timelines and everything, I'm like, is that going to be like a weird alien like curtain that's going to draw back and there's Sutek, Doctor? You know, no such luck, but who knows? You never know. It could still happen that way. As well as the idea of the monks wishing for consent. What is this? This is an interesting concept. They want unadulterated, you know, sort of unconditional consent. Consent through love. They are very pitched of wanting to be asked to help, of wanting to be asked perhaps back, maybe asked back into the world. And I really was reminded, I was thinking of this as we were seeing them interacting with the doctor and such, and the you know, the representatives of the different armies and such like that, the soldiers. I was really hearkened back to the silence from Series 6, the way they speak and their mouths move. Of course, the silence just sort of spoke telepathically, but there's a similar vein to that. And the discussion of how they took this form, the form of these monks and their corpses and everything, the symbolism there, it's again, it's like, this is what you did to us formerly. Now we want to come back. But if you recall, the doctor brought about a way that they could never come back to Earth. They had to leave because humanity would always remember them in you know, a particular fashion, with that shot of you know, the first landing on the moon and everything like that. It would always be buried in the subconscious of humanity. So what if the silence reformed their look, reformed their visage, but they still couldn't come back without humanity then requesting them to? There's a great analogy that Bill makes about vampires, how you know, a vampire cannot enter your home, enter your hearth without first being welcomed in, invited in. And so maybe it's playing on that. Maybe the monks are actually the silence after so many catastrophes, so many millennia in time and space of having been wrought havoc because of the doctor. And here they are trying to come back and trying to pick up where they left off, but they need humanity. They need to exploit a problem humanity has brought about to come back. Complete and utter speculation, could have nothing to do with the monks at all whatsoever. But this is the kind of things that were occurring to me watching this episode. And some of the episodes, as I say, touching upon my list as far as episodes that sort of cinematography-wise, the look, the feel, the vibe, not necessarily always the stories, perchance, but the way the episodes are filmed, the way the set design looks, the feel, the vibe of these particular episodes. Some of these that I've listed here are what this episode was reminiscent of for me. Starting off in my list, I have Series 6's The Wedding of River Song. The, you know, time compacting in on itself. We had a different Amy and Rory, and they weren't married, and she didn't recognize him, and she had to come around to figuring out who he was in her life former to that. And because River didn't want to kill the doctor, she refused to kill him on the beach in the spacesuit and all that kind of stuff. And there are aspects, visual aspects to that particular episode that this one harkened back to me, especially walking around inside the pyramid, and a couple other episodes as well. you had because the UN is involved, and because we're dealing with the Doctor being called the president of the world again, and he's on this special plane, designated for this with the leader of the UN. And oh, how did they get the TARDIS out of his office at the school? The windows weren't big enough. Well, they are now. But it reminded me of stuff like unit stories. The Power of Three from Series 7 was one that really stuck out to me, with UNIT being involved and the UN soldiers and everything being involved in this story. The time and place setting, as well as I referenced earlier that there was a story that, Peter Harness, who co-wrote this episode, had worked on that I didn't know when I was thinking of things that it reminded me of. It really reminded me, going back to Series 9, of the Zygon invasion and the Zygon inversion. From the sort of desert surrounding that they're filming the crux of the beginning of this episode, when they are going, they found the pyramid and they've come upon it. They brought the Doctor and Bill and Nardole out there to see it and try to understand it, what's going on with it. Really reminded me of how the Zygon invasion begins. And if you go back to that episode, a lot of the cinematography there looked very, very similar. And just the feel, getting UNIT involved, getting Kate Stewart involved, getting the Doctor involved, and having to worry about this quandary of an invasion coming to Earth, and just how prescient it was in sort of the current geopolitical way our world is right now. I mean, you got that great moment where, the UN soldier comes in, bringing the UN guy. He's like, do you know the president or whatever? And she's like, how would I know the president? He's orange, perfect, pitch perfect commentary, a little bit of a jab there, that kind of thing. And I'm perfectly in agreement with. But yeah, like I say, Peter Harness actually co-wrote with Stephen Moffat the two-part Zygon story from Series 9. And so it's interesting that not only story elements, in this particular case, characterization elements, but again, the cinematography was really on point with reminding me of that two-parter. And subsequently, Peter Harness also wrote the teleplay or TV adaptation miniseries of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which my good friend Z-Man actually sent me on DVD, several months ago now. And my sis and I had actually gotten to watching it in the last 6 months, last few months, really. And I thoroughly was wowed by it. I loved it. I loved the if you like Doctor Who and you've never seen it, you should check it out. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. The vibe, the time and place setting, the characters dealing with magic, sort of around the turn of the century, back in the 1800s and such like that. And it's just, it was really interesting. But to find that he wrote that as well, the screenplay for that was pretty awesome. I didn't know that until I did a little research after the episode to get all the episode titles that I needed to call out here on my list. Also, going back to Series 8, this episode really highly reminded me, again, mostly visually and tonally, with the two-parter Dark Water and Death in Heaven. And, of course, Death in Heaven is the first time, at least to my recollection, where the Doctor is referred to as being the president of the world. I think appointed as such by Kate Stewart and some of the, politicians of that era, whatever you want to say. And I just thought it was interesting, again, Dark Water especially, if memory serves, where, the Doctor and Clara are walking around that interesting inner working of that building, and you have the sort of skeletons behind the Dark Water, behind these mirrors or whatever they are. We find out, of course, spoiler warning, they're Cybermen. Oh no, there's Cybermen at the end of Series 10. Up and coming. So what does that all mean, How does that align? And Missy's been around, and we know the Master is going to be around too. Perchance Missy as well. And so those primarily are the things this episode really reminded me of, harkened me back to mostly modern series, I will admit. There wasn't so much interplay with, classic series stories, apart from, as I say, that sort of knee-jerk, instinctual reaction to say, oh, there's a pyramids of Mars, is Sutekh involved, that kind of thing. And the last sort of note that I put on here was in talking about the biochemical threat that is just about to be released, and I guess arguably so by the end, has actually been quelled, because Bill has been motivated through her love and caring and concern for the Doctor to make that deal to give her consent out of love for the monks to intervene, and suddenly the Doctor gets his eyesight back, and suddenly the problems are all fine, but are they? Because Nardole has been impacted by something. He is, he was coughing in the TARDIS. He's found to be collapsed in the TARDIS. Was he impacted by this biochemical nightmare? Is he now saved in the aftermath of it? Is there something else that was happening? I don't exactly know. I love when Nardole is following the Doctor around the center console. And he's like, "Are you following me?" And he's like, did you come upon that conclusion yourself?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm not just sexy, Nardole being badass as usual. Matt Lucas, my accolades to you and to everyone really. The performances, you can say what you will about the stories, but the performances in this series, and not just this series alone, but in Doctor Who, the entire history of Doctor Who, the performances are what sells it. They always take it seriously, even though they are campy and fun-loving at times. They take it seriously, like this is the reality of our scenario. This is the reality. The Time Lord, the Doctor, he's come to save Earth, or he's out there roving around in space, saving species after species, and these are his enemies and all this stuff. There's a legitimacy to it, and the performances sell it. And even if you can say a story was not that fulfilling, and not that engaging, and with Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor, with Pearl Mackey's Bill Potts, and of course Matt Lucas as Nardole, and even the secondary players, I bought into them from right out of the gate. I bought into their world, I bought into their plight, and they sold me on it. And if for nothing else, if there was any dissatisfaction with the episode, which there really wasn't, I can at least give them accolades for the performances and such like that. But that did leave me with one overhanging quandary. The Doctor's eyes were repaired, but was any of the other potential biochemical damage also repaired or not? Is it again? I mean, we're getting this every single episode. I'm bringing this up every single episode now. But is the Doctor already dying? He's very consumed with it at the start of the episode. He's meditating, air quotes, and he's talking very much about death. As soon as you're born, you're already dying. The rest of your life is dying. It's a very depressive sort of idea, but it's a realistic idea. I mean, we all have limited time on this planet, some more than others, and not barring accidents that sometimes hellaciously impact our lives. Look at how they've weaved that into the story with Clara and Danny Pink. It's stuff that happens. It is the human condition. We are imperfect, and we're not made to last, unfortunately. And so to see the Doctor so moved by his now weakness with the blindness, it's intriguing that he's in this place and that we keep tapping back on this, knowing that Capaldi's time as the 12th Doctor is limited, that he will be regenerating very, very soon, and it's just a sad fact that is coming. I'm really unhappy about that. I wish we had more Capaldi, but whatever his reasoning, whatever led to his, being ousted or leaving of his own accord, whatever you want to say about that, it's interesting that the Doctor's very much ruminating about that at the start of this episode, as if he knows something. Maybe he's already got the tip of the hat about something. He knows, and so again, to be brought back to the end of this episode, oh, well, he did get his eyesight back. Is it temporary? Is it permanent? Through the, influence of the monks, how did they bring this about and such like that? Is it a misdirection? Is it Missy pulling the strings as a puppet master? Who knows exactly how this is going to shape up? But it led me to wonder, is it the Caves of Androzani effect? Once again, the Doctor's been dying all along, or now he's dying from this point on, and it's just his regeneration yet to come. And I began to think when, we got down to the point of dire straits in this episode, the blindness and how impacted he was and how he almost lost his own life. Arguably so, being trapped in with that biochemical release and setting up that explosion. It did make me wonder, is this where we're going to see the end of the Doctor beginning, this incarnation? And I'm just worried for Nardole. I hope he's going to be okay. So at the end of the day, this was an enjoyable episode. It really challenged my perceptions and weaved a story that I wasn't so readily, as per usual, able to pick up on, and it made it that much more satisfying because it engaged me the whole way through. I was like, wow, what is going on? And yeah, otherwise, that's pretty much all I have to say on it. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. If you've seen this particular episode, if you're watching this video, why would you watch it without having seen it? But if you have, did you enjoy it? What was your overall impressions on it? Did you love it, hate it? Anything goes in the comments below, as long as we're respectable and amicable at the end of the day. I just love having that conversation. And so, yeah, otherwise, I can't wait to see how this particular arc culminates next week. And otherwise, it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.